The NFL draft is coming up in less than 2 weeks, and the Baltimore Ravens are being heavily linked to multiple elite draft prospects.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Ravens and a key draft strategy that I think they should be employing that not a lot of people are talking about right now. We'll talk about draft strategy in general for Baltimore. In the second part of the show, we'll talk about what some players had to say at their media availability about Jesse Minter setting a tone and the coaching staff setting a tone early for this team. But in the first part of the show, the Ravens are being heavily linked to multiple elite draft prospects by multiple draft experts and multiple experts in general. So we'll talk about that here in the first part of the show. And of course, here to do that with me today is Sam Njoku from the Ravens Talk podcast and the Locked On Ravens Squad show. Sam, it's crazy to think that we're less than 2 weeks away from the draft. We've done so much talk about prospects and trade ups and trade backs. And after just under a couple of weeks, it's all going to be done. We're going to know who the next batch of Ravens rookies is.
Yeah, every time I talk about or count down to it, I kind of second guess myself. Is it really 2 weeks away from now? I can't believe it. But yeah, it is coming fast and in a hurry. And soon we'll know who the next batch of Ravens prospects are to help this team get to the mountaintop.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And I think for me, we know that this team is always a draft and develop type of team. And they have 11 picks so far this season. So we are going to see how they end up using them. And there are a lot of ways that they could end up using them. One of the ways is on a couple of different options to help Lamar Jackson, whether that is the offensive line, whether that is a wide receiver, whether that is a tight end. And there have been multiple draft experts and experts in general who have linked the Ravens to a couple of different options to help Lamar Jackson. Now, there was an article that was put out by Matt Miller and Jordyn Reed and NFL Nation here where they went through what they're hearing, latest intel and questions, etc. And so they went through each pick in order. And for the Ravens, Matt Miller wrote in terms of what we're hearing about the Ravens in this draft, quote, "The Ravens have been connected to 2 pass catchers in Sadiq and wide receiver Jordyn Tyson from Arizona State. There might be a 50-50 shot of Sadiq being on the board at number 14 with the idea of Tyson or Omar Cooper Jr. at wide receiver to boost the offense makes sense." Now, Peter Schrager also talked about Sadiq a little bit for the Ravens and did a mock draft where he projects it, but it's more the like what we're hearing type of situation where the projections are actually based off of what he's hearing rather than what he would personally do at each spot. And for number 14, he said his pick is Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, the tight end. So he said, quote, "What better way to show Lamar Jackson and Ravens fans that the Baltimore offense isn't going anywhere without offensive coordinator Todd Monken or former tight end to Isaiah Likely than by drafting a supreme talent like Sadiq, one of the stars of the combine." Sadiq ran a 4.39 40-yard dash, the fastest time for a tight end since at least 2003. He also caught 51 passes last season, the most ever by an Oregon tight end. Mark Andrews is back in Baltimore, but he's now in his 30s, and this offense likes having multiple impact players at the position. So Sam, let's start with Sadiq. Obviously, he was the one that was linked by both Miller and Schrager. If Kenyon Sadiq, if the card is up and the pick is read out, the 14th pick, Baltimore Ravens select Kenyon Sadiq, what would your reaction be?
I'd be like, they really like him. They must really like him. And that's pretty much where I'm at with Kenyon Sadiq. Is he a very athletic tight end? Yes. Was he as productive in college that you would like from the first tight end being picked in the NFL draft? I don't know. I've watched some Oregon games. I have family who are Oregon Duck fans, so I've got to see him up close and personal throughout the few years he was there in Oregon. And he lives every bit the stud that we saw in the combine. The question is, does Declan Doyle know enough, trust enough, see enough from Kenyon Sadiq to pull that card? Because again, if you're drafting Sadiq, you are making a statement that you're not going to go after an offensive lineman, especially a top-tier O-lineman that you will have to have in the first round. Instead, you'll be hoping that they fall in the second or third round, the guy that you really want. So there is some risk associated with getting Kenyon Sadiq. But if they pull the card in, it's telling me that Declan Dole is really excited about the prospect of having a tight end of his caliber on the football field alongside Zay Flowers and Lamar Jackson.
It's interesting. He's 6'3", 241. I think you can line him up in a bunch of different places to be successful. And, he kind of is a do-it-all player in a lot of different ways. But I think for me, the question I have at the tight end spot with taking Sadiq at 14, Sam, is this is such a deep tight end class. Whether you talk about you can maybe get an Eli Stowers in the second or third round, there are late round options. I think Sadiq's an incredible player, and I think he would thrive in this Baltimore offense. But in terms of, again, it'll depend who's on the board. Like if it's Ioane or Sadiq, I think we're both going to take Ioane. Am I wrong in that, Sam? You're taking Ioane too?
Yeah. I mean, that's where my head's at. I've been getting ready for the draft and looking at all the prospects and trying to move past the first round to the other rounds. And I'm always stuck at that 14th pick. Do they really go with a top, with the offensive lineman, interior lineman with a top 15 pick? They have never done that before. So I'm always consistently worried about the fact that they might not go O-lineman in the first round. Would I be upset? No, but the expectation in my mind for now is that they're going Vega with the first pick in their draft. And if they don't go that way, then a guy like Sadiq or Ruben Bain has had that fall into them.
What about Tyson, Sam? He's someone who obviously has all the talent in the world, someone that if he can stay healthy, could turn out to be one of the better players in this entire draft class. I mean, he's 6'2", 203, has some of the skills and the intangibles that the Ravens are looking for, but the injury situation with him obviously is what people are talking about, and it's if he can stay healthy. So are you concerned at all about the injury stuff with Tyson? Is it worth the 14th pick to go out there and get him, especially if Carnell Tate and Mekhi Lemon are off the board at that point? Would you take Lemon over Jordyn Tyson? What would your response be if Tyson was their selection?
Tyson's my number one wide receiver right now. Mekhi Lemon was the number one wide receiver for a while, but I really love Tyson's game, and I try not to put too much emphasis on injuries, but it's bitten the Ravens in the butt so many times in the past with David Ajabo and other players of that nature. So you don't want to pigeonhole yourself because of the mistakes of the past in regards to injuries and what these players can do. But we know Tyson is going to be a baller. Can he stay healthy is the question. I think Jordyn Tyson being picked up 14 bodes better for the Ravens in terms of finding themselves an offensive lineman, because drafting Tyson tells you that Rashod Bateman's time in Baltimore is over. And you can trade Rashod Bateman for a second-round pick, either a late or an early second-round pick, paired it up with the pick you already have, and maybe move up back to the first round and grab an offensive lineman that you really want. So that's what that would tell me. But if I had to choose between Tyson and Sadiq, I'd probably go Sadiq because, again, he's a once-in-a-generation athletic, beast of a tight end. And, you have Rashod Bateman right now, and I still have hope that he could be that guy. Obviously, we only have a sample size of one season of him being the guy, but you got to hold on to hope and hope that he makes that turn to become that wide receiver 2 that can pair well with Zay Flowers. But if I had to choose between Sadiq and Tyson, I'm going Sadiq, but Tyson is an interesting prospect as well.
Could this just be a smokescreen? Could Sadiq be enlisted? And I've seen a lot more mocks with Sadiq going to Baltimore at 14. Could this be a classic, we're going to throw all this attention here so that we can go in a different direction? I thought that was Malachi last season because that's what the Ravens have done. And I'm like, oh, Malachi's being pushed as the guy for the Ravens. They're going him in Worry. And then, of course, Malachi was the Red Star guy for them, and that's who they ended up taking. So now I'm not so sure. That's why I want to ask the question, because usually I'd say, oh, yeah, Sadiq is being linked to Baltimore, and Tyson, there's no way those guys are going to Baltimore now. But we saw last season, Malachi was the guy that was heavily linked, and then he became a Raven. So would it shock you, I guess, if this was a smoke screen, or do you think this is maybe for real?
It wouldn't shock me if it was a smoke screen. I think that the Ravens are nervous, as am I. I think I mentioned this on social media. There is not a lock that Spencer Fano and Vega Ioane are available at pick 14 if the board falls to them. Everybody knows the Ravens need an interior offensive line. We just saw Daniel Falele get signed by the Giants. The Ravens are trying to rectify that, something serious. So everyone knows that the Ravens are going after no lineman. There are teams ahead of them that need an lineman. Maybe not to the point where they're emphasizing it, teams like the Bengals need an O-lineman. There's teams that can jump up ahead of the Ravens in the first round with that 13th selection and get a guy. The Rams have that pick. Rams are fantastic. The Rams don't really need to pick, high in the draft. They can go down lower. Whatever it takes. The Ravens are in a position where they need to have these smoke screens. Now, Sadiq, there's no guarantee Sadiq even falls to 14 as well, but this gives the Ravens the illusion of, hey, not so fast. I know we need an offensive lineman, but again, very deep class. We got guys in already during the free agency period that maybe Dwayne Leffert can help and teach and do all those sorts of things. But this may be more of a smokescreen than the Malachi Stark situation, which I was, again, heavily favored. I'm very excited about the pick. I still think he's going to be a phenomenal player, and this may be a smokescreen, I think, for this team.
Yeah, it'd be interesting for sure. And again, I don't even know. This is honestly something not a lot of people have talked about, but I've kind of floated it and I've kind of thought about it in my mind. I don't genuinely know how much the Ravens even like this draft class at 14 because they're willing to trade the pick away. So I think that there might be a situation, and we'll talk about this a little more in the final part of the show. It's a little bit of a tease what we're getting to in the final part of the show. But there is a potential situation where Baltimore maybe looked and said, there's probably not a high possibility of all these guys falling to us who we like at 14 at the top of that class, whether it's Bain or Tate or whoever, maybe they like those guys. And then they get to these guys who were maybe bunched into that like 12 to 14 to 16 range. And they're like, we're not so sure if they're so I'm not even sure how much they like the class at 14 because they want to trade the pick away. So we'll get to that a little more in the final part of the show. But coming up in the second part of the show, Sam and I will talk about Jesse Minter setting an early tone for this Ravens team, especially what the players had to say during the media availability on Wednesday. Stay tuned, plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Locked on Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku still here with you on this Friday edition, Purple Friday here. It's always Purple Friday on Locked on Ravens. And be sure you hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along with subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more daily Ravens coverage and content. We have 5 days a week of Ravens content and coverage for you, twice per day, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time. Plus, we have bonus episodes, watch-alongs, instant reaction shows, the squad show with Sam and I, as well as former Ravens receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail, and the Everyday Club for some extra add-on content. So if you want to check that out, links in the description down below, as well as on the Locked On Ravens page on the Locked On website. Sam, a tone has been set, in my opinion, here. Obviously, Lamar Jackson coming into the building. Everyone's talking about his I guess, availability. He's in there. He's there. He's doing the thing. But I think Jesse Minter's done a really good job. And obviously, like, all the attention's on Lamar, but Jesse Minter has done a great job of establishing his culture and his tone so far. And that extends to the rest of his coaching staff, to his players. We heard Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers and Kyle Hamilton talk a lot about that. And even the thing that caught my eye, and we kind of talked about this on the squad show a little bit, was Hamilton kind of going up there at the podium and said that, with Minter and even Anthony Weaver, he said, quote, "They've both done a great job of laying out where we've been in the past and where we want to go in the future and how the standard has not been met and upheld. And we need to fix that." So, I mean, that's pulling no punches. And Jesse Minter maybe was looking at some of that defensive tape and he's like, what's going on? What is going on here? Like, what is this? What is this nonsense that this team is running here? So he is ready for this team to break out of that shell that they've been in for the past, honestly, 2 years in a lot of different ways and come out on top. And I think that establishing that early is really important. The guys being in the building is really important. And I think he's done a really good job of making sure that everybody in the organization knows that the way things were trending is not acceptable and that they need to get on a different path. And, people might say, oh, that's savage or that. No, it's needed, in my opinion.
It's needed. And I'm glad he said it, because we don't need kid gloves over here. The Ravens were terrible on defense last year. I don't care what the stats say. I don't know if they were like really good and third downs or second downs. They were one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. With the star power that they have on defense with Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks, Roquan Smith, they got Mike Green over there. They got Travis Jones. There's no reason for them to have the type of defense that they had last year. So it's great that Jesse Minter and Anthony Weaver set the tone early, set the tone right off the bat, first day. Hey, we know what type of defense this Ravens franchise is accustomed to seeing, and that was not the case last year. And again, some of that's on John Harbaugh, some of that's on, Zachary Orr. Again, it's not really their fault because they took Mike Macdonald's playbook and they just read off a textbook with Jesse Minter. He created the book. He is formulating plans each and every week, minutes before the game starts. He's tinkering, trying to make sure that his defense is ready to go. It'll be nothing but positive for this team to have a guy like Jesse Minter on there, but it's up to the players to get the job done. So it's great that Minter and Weaver were able to set the tone early, so there's no discrepancies, no issues, no question marks regarding what he wants from his defense. Is excellence.
Yeah, obviously with the coaching staff, like, you get guys in who share your vision. And I think that Anthony Weaver, Declan Doyle, Dwayne Ledford, all these guys, they're on the same page with the message that needs to be sent here. And they're on the same page with Minter in terms of what their visions are. And that's actually something Mark Andrews talked about with Declan Doyle in particular, because he said he's excited about the new offense. And he made it a point, by the way, to kind of thank John Harbaugh and went on a tangent about Harbaugh and how grateful he was to be with him and et cetera. But mentioned he was very excited about the new era of Ravens football and, all the new stuff going on. But when it came to Doyle, he said, quote, "There's a lot of growing and learning him, but being around him for the first few days seems like an incredibly dynamic person, fiery, loves football." He said he prides himself on being a teacher, and I think that's a beautiful thing, and said that he's done a really good job of doing that so far. So look, it's early in the process, right? Like, you have a lot of learning to do, and, even I'm sure guys are still learning people's names in that building right now because there's so much turnover. But I think that's the thing that Jesse Minter has preached, and it, again, trickles down to everyone else on that coaching staff, is being able to give the players the best opportunities to go out on the football field and dominate. And how do you do that? Well, you make sure the players understand and know everything, and it's their job to essentially put the players in that spot. And, that's something we kind of heard back and forth last year from the players and the coaches in Baltimore at times, where the players were reluctant to blame, like, for example, like Zach Orr. None of the defensive players are like, it's Zach Orr's doing this. And all. It was always like, hey, it's on us. We're the ones that go out there. We're the ones that, drop the ball or, miss a tackle, et cetera, et cetera. And for the coaches, you saw, for example, Todd Monken take accountability and say, hey, you know what, at the end of the day, it starts with me, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's some of the good that we saw last season. There was also a lot of other stuff that we don't have to get into from last season. But I think, again, you take that little bit of good or some of that good and you make that the whole mindset. I think that goes a long way in terms of the coaches understanding their responsibility and their role in getting the players ready, and the players taking that knowledge, taking advantage of this, and then going out there and dominating.
1,000%. And I think it's going to be really good for this Ravens team. We mentioned it. We saw what Jesse Minter did in LA, put the players in the right position. That was a big sticking point for a lot of analysts and Ravens fans out there who watched, this defense, put Marlon Humphrey in situations where we know he struggles against speedy receivers on the outside. We know he doesn't do well in that. So unless the defense and unless an opposing offense is putting Marlon Humphrey in that position, there's no reason to do it yourself. Same thing with the edge rushers. Kyle Vanoy playing, setting the edge as a run stuffer. That's not his game. He's a pass rusher. Same thing with Mike Green. He's a smaller guy. So all those things come into fruition. We doubt we see that with Jesse Minter. Of course, injuries played a toll for the Ravens. You had to put players somewhere. It was something like that. But you saw the frustration with the players, and this will not be the case. I don't think the Ravens players will have the outside opinion from Ravens fans to say, well, it's got to be the coaches because we know the players are good. We know the coaches are good this time. We know Jesse Minter is a phenomenal player. We know Dwayne Ledford is a phenomenal O-line coach. We've seen what Declan Doyle has done in Chicago. It's going to be up to the players. There will be no excuses coming in 2026 for these guys.
No, not at all. And I think, honestly, that's what's needed here, where At this point, it's like put up or shut up time, right? And there's an interesting dynamic, and there's honestly this dynamic for a lot of teams, Sam, because usually, well, I shouldn't say usually, but decent amount of the time when you fire a coach, it's usually because your team is not doing well, and usually that's like your top 5, top 10 territory consistently for the however many years that coach is there. The Ravens are in a situation where like it'd be unfair to just say, hey, if the Ravens don't make it and win the Super Bowl in year one, Jesse Minter's first year was a failure, and like, oh, he should be fired. They're in two different timelines that need to mesh into one timeline, essentially, where it's like we know the urgency and we've heard that urgency. Again, I think Hamilton, he displayed that. Zay Flowers displayed that. Andrews, even like we talked with Nick Moore on Thursday morning for Locked On Ravens yesterday, and he was very adamant about the urgency that's being set, the guys being in the building, the tone that's being set right now. But I think it's also like a little bit like not fair to Jesse Minter to say, oh, well, you have to have 100% of everything down by week one, and that's it. Like Mike McDonald didn't even win the Super Bowl in year one, right? He won it in year two. And that's something that Zay said as well. And I talked with Nick about this yesterday too, where Zay was just kind of like, look, everybody's here. Everybody wants to prove something. Everybody wants to take that next step. Like Coach Mike McDonald, he went to Seattle, won a Super Bowl in 2 years. We're trying to get that done. We're trying to get that done this year, though. So I do want to ask you this, and this is I'll be honest with you. I'm asking you this question really early, and I'm going to ask you about it again in a couple months. But I want to hear your mindset right now. What does a successful season for the Ravens look like this season, knowing everything with where they are from a roster perspective and where they are from a coaching perspective?
It's not Super Bowl or bust, like I said last year. I was very adamant, shouted it to the heavens. Every Ravens fan know what I said about it. But I still have high expectations. I still have high hopes. As you mentioned, Mike McDonald took him 2 years to get to a championship, but Mike McDonald didn't have Lamar Jackson. Mike McDonald didn't have Eric DeCosta. So I think the pressure is still there for the Ravens to get the job done. Again, I think of it as a 5-year plan. How many times did you reach the AFC Championship? With Lamar Jackson, a healthy season, what are you doing as a franchise to ensure that Lamar Jackson is put in the best position to win a championship? Does that mean shoring up the offensive line? I've been talking about the entirety of this offseason. Is that meaning getting him another weapon like a Kenyon Sadiq or another wide receiver on the outside like an A.J. Brown or maybe even a Tyreek Hill if they're as desperate as the Ravens may appear to be to some? I don't think they're that desperate. But the point being, they need to do what they need to do to get to the promised land. They have all the tools to do it. I know Jesse Minter is the first-year head coach. And people don't talk about that. There is the learning curve with being the first-year head coach, challenging plays, calling timeouts, understanding when and when not to butt your head in to a certain situation with an offensive play or defensive play. I guess not defensive play because he's calling the plays. But those things that plague John Harbaugh may plague Jesse Minter, at least early on, because he's never had the main headset as being the top dog as a coach. So it'll be interesting. Again, my expectations are high. Not saying Super Bowl or bust, but it'd be pretty nice to get to the championship.
Yeah, and again, like even with what Zay was talking about with Mike McDonald, there was a Miami game that we do not talk about on this show because I still don't believe it ever happened during Mike McDonald's first couple of weeks where we saw that. And I think a lot of people, oh, he's done. He's terrible. Why'd they make this high? And then we saw what happened week 3 on. And that was like the Mike McDonald, Kyle Hamilton revenge arc in week 3 where Hamilton got his revenge. It was Nelson Aguilar, Raven legend, by the way. So again, I'm not expecting perfection here from Jesse Minter. I will say what gives me a little more confidence, and maybe this is me just grasping the straws, but I think it means something, is that Mike McDonald had never called plays at the NFL level before getting back to Baltimore. Obviously, he called them collegiately. Zach Orr had never called plays defensively at all when he took over the coordinator job. Jesse Minter has, and I know that there's a difference between being a D coordinator and being a head coach. Like you mentioned, there are going to be some just like, I think, in-game things. I 100% agree with you on that. But in terms of like maybe the defense starting slow, that's one of the things, and we talked about this on the squad show. It's just like one of the things that you can do as a defense or just a team in general is do not start slow again. It's been 2 years of painfully slow starts for this Ravens team. If you want to talk about defense, you want to talk about win-loss, like get off to a faster start this season. Now that I say that, they're going to schedule like games against 5 straight playoff teams again to start the season. But again, it's important that you establish something early. It's not going to result in the win every time probably, but there's a lot of good going on early to make sure that you take advantage as much as you can as humanly possible with this early start and just staying in the building, hopefully, for a lot of these guys and getting as much work as you can before this season begins. Coming up, though, there's a lot of strategy the Ravens could use in this one for the 2026 draft. And Sam and I'll talk about a few because there are a lot of different ways that Baltimore could approach not just the 14th pick, but their picks after that. So stay tuned. Plenty coming up on the show. First, the show is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on, you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher, Sam Njoku, still here with you on this Friday edition of Locked On Ravens. Sam, how important is this draft compared to last year? Let's start there, where obviously we mentioned a little bit in the second part of the show where the expectations are a little bit different this season in a lot of different ways. Still, Super Bowl is the goal, but there's a difference between John Harbaugh, who I thought was more on the hot seat than some people thought at the beginning of last season, versus where Jesse Minter is right now. And I think in this draft, compared to last year's draft, you still want players that can impact the all sides of the ball, three of them immediately. But to you, when looking back at last year, knowing what picks they had and what picks they made and how they approached that draft, does this draft give you any more, I guess, urgency for the Ravens than it did last season? Are you more nervous for this one than you were last season? Is there more urgency for you to get every single pick right? Kind of where's your mindset?
I don't think it's hyperbole to say that this is probably one of the top 5 most important drafts in Ravens history. I think it's hugely important. This is a new regime, new offensive scheme, most likely, new defensive philosophy in certain instances. Again, the Ravens are transitioning from a Mike McDonald defense to Jesse Minter defense. I know Zach Arroyo was in the middle there, but this is really, all intents and purposes, a very similar defensive style to what Jesse Minter ran in LA. So shouldn't be that different. But whatever Declan Doyle has in mind, what Lamar Jackson, whatever these players have in mind, what this offense will look like, it'll be up to Eric DeCosta to dictate that, make sure that the pieces are in place so that they can hit the ground running early and fast, like we mentioned in the second segment. So I think it's very important. I think that Eric DeCosta is up for the challenge. Having 11 picks doesn't hurt. More chances to hit than miss. But yeah, this is a really important draft, way more so than last year. Obviously, last year, the Ravens didn't lose that many players. This year, they lost plenty, have a lot of holes to fill, a lot of depth to fill. So I think it's very important, but I'm not overly concerned because I think that this draft is deep in a lot of the areas that the Ravens need.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways that they can approach it, and I tend to agree with you. And I talked about that on the PM show for yesterday, where I had said that this is not, and I've said this many times, but this is not the time to go take the Toolsy Odafe Oways who don't have the production, and you say, oh, that guy can be great in 3 years, or he can really reach his full potential. No, you want a guy who has a high floor and a high ceiling too, but you want to find those guys, especially because ideally you're not going to be picking in this range for a long time. Hopefully you can pick at 14 here and then be picking in the late 20s, early 30s, hopefully 32. So you want to take advantage as much as you possibly can with this. Now, for you, Sam, as we kind of talked about in that first part of the show, I don't know how much the Ravens like this class. I don't know how much the Ravens like who could be available at pick 14. I think it's more possible that they trade back than they do trade up, partially because I just don't think the Ravens are going to trade up because they didn't for Kyle Hamilton. So I'm just like, there's no way they do it again, right? But they could trade back, get more draft capital, and then either move up from 45 to a second first-round pick, get 2027 draft capital. They would have to be sure that there's someone that they would like and maybe whatever they trade back to, 19, 23, 25, whatever it would be. But if they traded back And there were still a plethora of prospects that probably weren't as good as the guys you could get at 14. But then you factor in maybe a second first round pick, maybe a second round pick. Would that be worth it to you, knowing you'd only have to move back, I don't know, maybe anywhere from 12 to 15 spots?
Yeah, I don't see the Ravens trading up at all. I think that it'll cost too much for them to trade as high as I think they'll need to grab a guy that will fall, maybe like a Ruben Bain or even a Carnell Tate. I could see them moving from 14 to 11 or 14 to 12, but any higher than that, I just don't see the Ravens doing it. As far as moving back, maybe, like, I think that, like we mentioned, they traded away the 14th pick for Maxx Crosby. And I'm not sure if this was made public or not, or if I just heard it from a source. So I'll just say it because I'm pretty confident in what I heard. The Ravens outright and said it. They weren't really feeling whatever the top 15 of the draft was compared to getting a guy like Maxx Crosby. So is there going to be a guy in the top 15 for like Maxx Crosby? Probably not. So that's where the Ravens' mindset was when they made the selection. Now they had the top 14 pick 14 to be exact. They're playing with house money, in my opinion. So I think they'll stay pat. I think they'll still pat, pick at 14, maybe trade back in the third round for more picks. But I think the 14th pick and the 45th pick are crucial for this Ravens team. If more anything, maybe the Ravens trade up from the 45th pick up to grab a guy in the top of the second round or even the bottom of the first.
I think if you can get as many top 100, I'll go 100 picks as possible, get as many day one and day two picks as you can. Because again, as we've said, and Q wants 4, I don't think it's going to get to that little, but if you can get like 4 to 5 top 100 picks in this class, I feel very confident some of the second and third round, like day two prospects that could come in and contribute for you pretty immediately at some positions. It could be tight end, could be wide receiver, could be O-line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I feel pretty confident in that. So if you can trade up from, I don't know, you trade 115 and some of those extra 6 that you have, and you get back into the top 100 right at the end of day two, that to me is probably their best bet. So I think that there will be movement from the Ravens. And again, I've said this when they had 6 fourth rounders in 2022 or whatever it was. And I'm like, there's no way they take 6 fourth rounders, right? And then look what happened. They took 6 fourth rounders. So
that's crazy.
It's not out of the realm of possibility they keep all 11, but I cannot imagine a world, Sam, where they keep all 11 picks and all 11 picks make the roster. It'd be a waste of draft capital, in my opinion. They did that last season. They wasted some of their draft capital on guys that didn't make the roster. Garrett Dellinger in particular. The 2 corners were injured, so I'm not necessarily counting them right now. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of avenues for Baltimore. If they don't like the top end of this class where 14 is, you can still make this class work for you, especially knowing, and if you want to trade back and get a 2027 second or third, that class is considered a lot deeper than this class is. So there are ways you can make it work, even if you don't end up picking at 14. But my prediction is still they will stick and pick, like you said.
Yeah, that's my pick too. I think they'll stand pat with the 14th pick, but you're right. The 2027 draft class looks to be a lot deeper. Maybe they do trade. I don't know if they trade a top, I don't know if they trade a day 2 pick for a 2027, day 2 pick. I think maybe a 4th round pick for a 3rd round pick in 2027, something like that. They could do that. They could make it work. But yes, there are 2 huge holes in the interior of that offensive line. Center for sure, guard, depending on who you talk to. And then, of course, we don't know if anybody big is going to play. All signs are pointing positively to yes, but you definitely don't want to go into the season and regretting not having a backup plan. That's for sure. Also, corner is something that needs to be addressed. We know Marlon Humphrey's days in Baltimore are numbered. I think that they need to really attack the draft with a sense of urgency and a sense of knowing that 2026 is the year where they need to get it done. But 2027, also a very good opportunity for them to get this roster back with youth talent-wise.
Yeah, and Eric DeCosta's job is to balance the present with the future and figuring it all out. But at this point, you know how important of a year this is, and next year too. Again, you don't want to just sacrifice your whole future and do all that. And Baltimore, I guess, didn't want to do that when it came to trading for Maxx Crosby at the end of the day. But there are a lot of avenues the Ravens could take in this draft for sure. Sam, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on the White. Be sure to tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Ravens Talk Podcast. I'm talking football with Ravens fans all year long, no doubt about it. We have a new show that just dropped a couple of days ago with Femi Ayanbadejo on YouTube, and we'll go ahead and check that out. Also, wherever you get your podcast, we have every single podcast rump covered. So go ahead and check out the podcast there. You can also catch me on the Locked On Ravens Squad show with Kevin and Q talking Ravens football on Mondays and Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time.
Yep. Sam is doing it all. Be sure to go check him out. Support his stuff. Links to be in the description down below. Sam, I appreciate you again. Thanks so much. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened today to Locked On Ravens on the web. Be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for that 5 days a week plus more daily Ravens coverage. Coming up, we will have Locked On Ravens PM at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And then if there are any headlines, we'll do some bonus episodes over the weekend. But if not, we'll be back here on Monday for another week of Ravens football conversations. So be sure to stay tuned. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.